Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm just unpacking from the tournament I just got back from, which was Lake of the Ozarks Bassmaster Open. That was stop number 8. So we got one more tournament left on the Harris chain coming up. I leave next week, end of next week. Anyways, if I look a little dusty or dirty, it's because I just got off the lawnmower. This place is, even though it's getting into fall, this grass still grows pretty quick. But anyways, I wanted to go ahead and walk through all of the tackle and the ways that I caught fish at Lake of the Ozarks, because let me tell you, I fished a lot of lakes in September, and September is usually a very, very difficult month. September and early October, generally across the South, really across the country, is not a very good time period for catching numbers of fish or even big fish. That was completely not the case at Lake of the Ozarks. Lake of the Ozarks is incredibly chock full of fish. Let me tell you, all three species. I didn't catch any smallmouth, but I know that they've got some smallmouth, or at least, you know, it's a Ozarks lake, so it's got to have smallmouth. But it just had a ton of fish in it. And so there was no shortage of catching throughout the week. And so pretty much going into this tournament, you know, I came right out of Watts Bar. We had a good finish there, finished 14th. I knew that on Watts Bar, the shad patterns were starting to really start to play big time, because the shad were starting to move into the backs of the creeks. And so that fall migration that goes on with the shad species, both gizzard and threadfin, was definitely happening here, and I expected it to happen at Lake of the Ozarks. And when I got there, to be honest, you know, I started practicing and way up a branch of the, I think it's called the Niangua River, maybe it's called the Little Niangua River, but I ended up going way up one of those main tributaries and really was not excited about what I saw. I think the first hour and a half, I didn't have but one bite. But as soon as I started getting out of that main river or creek arm where the actual river or creek was coming in, I started to realize that there was a major shad migration. They just hadn't made it all the way in the backs of that part of the creeks. So the shad were kind of, you know, still on the main drag. You know, a lot of the pockets started to get a lot of shad schools in it. So that migration was definitely happening big time, but it just wasn't like way backs in those major creek arms yet. So I ended up intercepting, you know, a really good pattern that's similar to what I did at Watts Bar, throwing a swim jig and a chatterbait, really any reaction bait on docks. I was even swimming just a regular flipping jig around these floating docks, which Lake of the Ozarks, if you've never been there, has about 70,000, and that's not an exaggeration, 70,000 floating docks on that lake. And floating docks are definitely my favorite type of dock to target this time of year, because generally the fish are positioned on the outside edge, either the sides, the very end of the dock, or just pretty much the sides or the end of the dock. And they're positioned there to intercept those schools of shad as they move on past those docks. Because the shad generally, I don't think that the shad like to go under the docks. I think they like to go hit the docks and then kind of like avoid the shade of the docks and go around. And that's why I was only getting bit on the perimeters of those floating docks. That's just my guess. So anyways, ended up finding a really good pattern in the Niangua, but not, like I said, not way up one of those, the main rivers, but kind of like on the way back into those river portions. That's where I started to see a huge migration of shad and started catching a lot of fish. In fact, I was catching like 40 fish in practice, and that's not even fishing hard. That's just going through an area, you know, maybe getting one or two keeper bites and then taking off. So there was a ton of fish that were trying to eat these shad as they were coming in, and they're all positioned on the docks. And during the tournament, I decided, because a lot of the fish were just swiping at the bait, I decided that a chatterbait is probably going to be my best option for getting fish in the boat. And it's a confidence bait. I'm very efficient with it. I love throwing a chatterbait. And so that was kind of the deal. And they were eating it really good. So essentially, during the tournament, even though I found a good pattern in the Niangua, I ended up finding better average size. Same exact bite, but better average size up the river. And when I say up the river, I'm talking about the main drag of Lake of the Ozarks, and I was traveling about 60 miles, close to 60 miles each way to my location. So I was making a pretty good haul up the lake, but my average size was really, really good. And that first day was like spectacular. You know, I caught like, I don't know, 12 or 13 or so fish that were in the 3-pound class, and came in with 16 pounds and 16 and a quarter pounds. But I did it all, both days. You know, the second day I didn't catch them near as good. The bite completely shut down up the river, and so I had to kind of like back up on the Niangua, and ended up catching my limit and culling once down there in the last 2 hours. But all of my bites came on a chatterbait. So this one right here was my primary chatterbait. Okay, this is a 1/2 ounce dirty white, which is a fairly new color. It was introduced, I think, at not this last iCast, but the iCast before. So dirty white with a pearl diesel minnows trailer on it. Okay, so this combo looked really, really good in the water. I was fishing kind of stained water, and one thing I like about the dirty white is actually two things. First thing is it's called dirty white because you got kind of these black and white strands in there. It kind of gives it a little bit more of a realistic shad pattern or scale pattern, and then it also has a gold blade. It's one of the only chatterbaits that has a gold blade, and I really like that color gold in the dirty water that I was fishing. So that was kind of my main color right there. And this one, just like all the other chatterbaits, I was fishing it on a 7.2 to 1 gear ratio VLD10 from Fitzgerald and a 7.3 medium heavy Versa series rod. And you can, I'm going to put the links to all those in the description below. But there was also some other situations where I needed like a little bit more neutral colors. Well, actually, there was actually one situation, you know, when the water would clear up a little bit, you'd want something a little bit more neutral, like this one right here. Okay, something a little bit more, transparent, translucent, and then I put a pearl blue glimmer trailer on that. So it's not like quite as bold and gaudy. It's you know, a little bit more transparent. That's the natural shad color chatterbait. Still 1/2 ounce. Same exact rod and reel setup. Oh, and I forgot to mention the line that I'm using with these chatterbaits was primarily 20-pound Tatsu. Okay, now you've heard me in other videos say that I use Red Label a lot, and I definitely used Red Label a lot during practice for this tournament. But the key to fishing the chatterbaits on these docks was to burn them as fast as possible right below the float. So they just be right below the float, but you reeling it as fast as you can while keeping it at that level. And the Tatsu has a slightly smaller diameter than the Red Label, which helped me kind of get the bait just slightly deeper. I'm talking about maybe an inch deeper under this scenario, but it definitely made a difference. So I was using Tatsu for this tournament. That's the same one I just picked up. All right, so if the water got muddier, you know, it got really dirty, and maybe I needed something a little bit brighter, maybe it was early morning, cloudy conditions, dirty water, that's when I just use straight white. Okay, so same pearl diesel minnows, but just straight white jackhammer. So I mean, it's a beautiful thing when, at least for my style of fishing, when you can have 3 chatterbaits rods on the deck, and that's pretty much all you're using. I had an absolute blast fishing those. I also had one other pattern that didn't end up formulating during the tournament at all, but it worked in practice pretty well, and I thought that it would be my opportunity to catch a big bite, and that was throwing a whopper plopper. I threw a whopper plopper. Let me go get the whopper plopper I threw real quick. All right, so I was throwing this whopper plopper right here for bluegill eating fish, so the fish that were really focused on bluegill around the docks. I don't know what color that is, but it's kind of greenish gold. And I use that on a medium heavy 7.3 and the same reel. So pretty much the same setup, except for I used 40-pound Tactics braid from Seagar on that. So that was the only other thing that I threw in the tournament. You know, I really didn't catch any fish on anything else. It was just that. I had a 1-2 punch. I'd either throw a chatterbait around the docks for the fish that were focused on shad, and then as soon as I get into the backs of the pockets where I started to notice more bluegill, and I feel like those bigger fish were focused on bluegill, I would throw that whopper plopper. But again, during the tournament, it didn't formulate, but I did end up catching a 6-pounder the second day of practice on that whopper plopper, and when I took the hooks off, ended up catching or getting a bunch of good, what looked like 4+ pounders come up on that bait. So it's definitely a deal, and it is the Ozarks, so they love whopper ploppers, but unfortunately it just didn't line up in that event. But anyways, guys, just wanted to run through the tackle that I used for this event. A couple more things I do want to mention. A tournament like this, I have to give a big shout out to you know, the equipment that got me to the spot. You know, I'm making close to a 60-mile run each way, and I never once had an issue with my Mercury, and of course the Phoenix, and also the motor guide. You know, if something happened when I was up the river, you know, I'd be, you know, out of luck pretty much. So I need to give a shout out. That V8 4-stroke, man, has been very solid. And of course I made sure that I checked the oil, dialed that all in. I even changed the props a little bit after day one. So when I got off the water on day one, I realized, I was like, man, I'm just not running as fast as I should. You know, after a season kind of ends, you start to lose a little bit of cupping on your props. They slow down a little bit, got some nicks on there. That all slows down your props. So I swapped over from a 23 pitch Fury 3-blade to a 24 pitch and gained 4 miles an hour, which was really super important, especially since I was kind of behind the 8 ball on day 2, finding that my areas weren't producing. And having to, you know, run downriver again and find something real quick. So making those switches made a big difference. I will say this, if you're looking at swapping props for, you know, with a similar setup, you know, same 921 Elite Phoenix and 254 stroke, I think overall the 23 pitch runs better. I've done videos on this. 23 pitch definitely runs better. It's got a better hole shot. It may not run quite as fast, but that hole shot makes a big difference, especially if you're taking off out of shallow water. And I will say that the 24 just took a little bit longer to get on plane, but once you're on plane, you definitely made, you know, your top end speed very quickly. And so, you know, you just got to weigh the pros and cons. But anyways, just wanted to give a shout out to my other equipment that really helped me along the way. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about this tournament, drop a comment below. If you have any questions or you want me to do a video on a topic, drop a comment in the comment section as well. Other than that, make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out in the water. Trust the process.